Welcome to this presentation of the Odyssey on books 9 and 10. The main new character that we are going to encounter in these next two books is Polyphemus, who is the Cyclops son of Poseidon, and he devours almost all of Odysseus's men. The Cyclops and all of the Cyclopses tend to live by their own set of rules. And that leads us to ask the question, are these creatures civilized or barbaric? And this is especially important having come out of the last couple of books where we really analyzed this code of hospitality that was something that, albeit it was unspoken, it was something by which all of the peoples of all of the world would live by. And the Cyclopses, somewhat in almost every way, thought of themselves as being exempt from it. Polyphemus absolutely exhibited this because he was a poor host. Usually hosts do not eat their guest, and that would be the first and foremost sign of a bad host, and Polyphemus was the one to do that. And when Odysseus and his men come into Polyphemus's cave, because they are used to living by this code and they expect others to live by this code, they go ahead and partake of Polyphemus's wine and cheese because they go, well, basically it's owed to us anyway. We're going to give him gifts, so he can in turn, of course, he'll give us gifts, and that's not the way that it was. He gives a curse and makes Odysseus wander for 10 years. And keep in mind, this is going to follow right in line with Poseidon being against Odysseus. And this is the absolute crux of the reason why Poseidon is against Odysseus. Even though in the past he may have favored other men, but because this was really basically the straw that broke the camel's back, if you want to say that, and made Poseidon have this terrible vendetta against Odysseus. So he's already taken 10 years and devoted that to a cause that was basically not his own by fighting the Trojan War. And now he's going to have another 10 years before he is going to be able to get home. And keep in mind, this is all in keeping with getting the reader up to speed on what the backstory was. Remember, we began our story in medias res, in the middle of things, and so this is a way for the author to go back and relay past information. Another aspect to answer for you to think about is Polyphemus civilized or barbaric? Is his lawless nature? The Cyclopses do not adhere to any of this code of hospitality. And in the ancient Greek mind, hospitality equaled civilization. If you are of a civilized manner, you would, of course, adhere to this, and even more importantly, because the gods had instructed you to do so. So for Greek society as a whole, unity was helping one's neighbor, and if you are stranded or alone, as in the case of Odysseus and his men, Polyphemus's neighbors failed to help him. And a lot of that, too, was because in the clever aspect, Odysseus gave the name of nobody to the Cyclops. So when Polyphemus's eye was wounded, he went around hollering, "Nobody has wounded me, nobody has hurt me." And so it really, what the joke's on you, but Polyphemus the joke ended up being on Odysseus because Polyphemus goes crying to daddy, and then that in turn marks down another 10 years of the wandering for Odysseus. And another element, if you want to think about this, even though we have our hero who is Odysseus, all of the heroes are going to have basically a tragic flaw. And we saw that with Achilles in the Iliad, it was his pride. And then the same thing we're going to see with Odysseus is his pride. When he says, "I am nobody," if he would have just left it at that and left the Cyclops' island and gone on about his business, then Polyphemus would have gone crying to Poseidon and said, "Nobody has hurt me, nobody has hurt me." But it wasn't until Odysseus escaped, and then he told Polyphemus his real name, which he basically shot himself in the foot. It did him no good whatsoever. So his pride really got in the way of his better judgment at that aspect. For him to be so clever, that was really a bad call on his part. For book 10, and it's Odysseus continuing on his journey, he meets Aeolus, who is the keeper of the magical bag of winds, Antiphates, who is the king of the Laestrygonians, who are the man-eating giants, and then Circe, the sorceress goddess of the Isle Aea. And then while the men are on Circe's island or Circe's palace, one of Odysseus's men, Elpenor, who is a young crewman, falls off of Circe's balcony and in a drunken state and dies. And this really goes to show, while it's not so much, it makes Odysseus have to come back and have to retrace his steps somewhat, but it really reiterates the importance of burial of that time. And here, if you look at this picture, you can see Odysseus's journey as he leaves Troy. You can follow all the little places that he stops, and he has to go back and help Elpenor because if he is not given a proper burial, and this goes back to the same thing with all of the bodies in the souls in the Iliad, if they were not given a proper burial, then their souls would be forever doomed to wander in the underworld. They would not go to either place, Tartarus or the Elysian fields, which the Elysian fields would be more what we would consider heaven, and then Tartarus would be what one would consider hell. But either way, if you did not receive the proper burial, you would not get to go to either side. And so that little part is just basically a restatement of the importance of burial to the ancient Greeks. In book 10, the role of the host and guest is vital, and this is continually underscoring that theme of the code of hospitality. Circe is yet another malevolent host, like Polyphemus the Cyclops. Odysseus at the beginning refuses her hospitality until his men are restored. He is instructed that he must sleep with her, but he's not going to do so until he gets what he has come therefore, which is the safety of his men restored. Afterwards, hospitality is resumed, and then he ultimately stays for a year. Circe also parallels Aeolus, however, the roles change. Aeolus begins as a benevolent host, but then changes because he believes that Odysseus has been cursed. His negative behavior foreshadows upcoming events. Because Odysseus has to go back and see Aeolus because he sees that he has gotten off his track. He says, there is not another man as cursed as you, and I basically want no part of it. You are a danger to yourself and evidently to others. So there are a lot of different characters that can strongly support that theme of, are they barbaric? Are they civilized? Does that make one really understand or adhere to this code of hospitality? So it's something to really think about as you are meeting these characters and the characters that we will encounter in the next few books.